Most of you we've worked with, but not all of you, so let me give a quick introduction to who Stepping Out really are. We are a small consultancy firm. We are specialised in helping good public services become even better social businesses, and we've helped quite a few of you to achieve that. Our model is simple and straightforward. We've got 3 stages. We help organisations to first get their heads around in what we call the setting out stage. What does it really involve to be a social enterprise or a mutual? What are these beasts all about? What are the intricacies? We help people get comfortable with the ideas and the concepts. And once they feel that that's actually a path they want to explore further and maybe build a business themselves on, then we go into a stepping out phase, which is really about working it out, planning, doing an options analysis, getting the nuts and bolts together of what this new organisation might look like, and then helping these organisations to actually implement that plan and launch as a spin-out. This may even involve finding some social investment and or a partner, and it's that kind of package that we built in partnership with yourselves. But once you're out, that's not the beginning, or it's not the end of it. It's very much the beginning of your new life. And as I've already picked up from some of you earlier this morning, life doesn't become any easier. As a matter of fact, the challenges keep coming and coming and coming, and that's a good thing. And that's also where we hope to be playing a part, and that's where today's program very much fits in, which is about growth, which is about becoming more successful and not just being satisfied with where you arrived at on a particular launch day. So that's stepping out. We do this in a whole range of sectors, and we're very fortunate to have been working with lots of local authorities, lots of NHS organisations, and other organisations as well throughout the country. If you want to know more about it, see us in any of the breaks. I'm going to grab my glass of water. What I want to take you through briefly in a fairly high pace today, and because I want to avoid that hook, is four topics, or 3 really. Why growth? Why is growth important? What lies ahead potentially, and that's part of your growth planning, of course, scanning the future and anticipating what might happen. Then I want to take you briefly through a case study based on Beach Leisure, a very successful spin-out, as you may know. And then I want to leave you with a couple of final thoughts. Okay? And that should get us through 20 to 30 minutes, and hope maybe there's even time for some questions. If you have an urgent question in the meantime, feel free to shout it out. I'll be more than welcome to try and answer it. So, very briefly, the spin-out market. Why growth? Well, the spin-out market, at the moment, we've got about 100 plus spin-outs since about 2005, delivering about 1 million plus of public services. And we've seen all this trend where initially this was picked up by the NHS under right to request, and then it moved on to where the world of the NHS got slightly distracted, and local authorities took on this banner of spinning out and see what it could mean for them. We've seen a lot in health, we've seen a lot in adult and social care, but as I've already picked up today, that some of you are very different sectors to those. Some of my examples will be coming from health and social care because it tends to be about 2/3 not only of the spin-out market, but also about 2/3 of our work. And the cabinet, or the government in general, started of course with Labour. The coalition have picked up the good example. I've run with it since. The government have played an important part in stimulating this whole market, as you know, and unfortunately today they're closed for business, but hopefully after general elections things will be picking up. We'll have to wait and see, and I'll touch upon that in a second. How are spin-outs doing? There is some data available from Cabinet Office that indicates that on average spin-outs grow by about 10% per year after they launch. And what I've done is, some of you have seen this graph before, although I've recently updated it for the latest information. Spin-outs grow, the group of spin-outs that we've worked with and that I've analysed have grown on average about 9% a year in income. Now, that's a tremendous achievement if you realise that GDP growth has been pretty low for a large part of the last 10 years, and of course at the moment is standing at about 2.5% to 3%. And if your organisations are growing by about 9 to 10%, then you're doing a tremendous job. But of course, income turnover is only one thing. If you watch Dragon's Den, I love watching Dragon's Den because I learn from it every single time, and I recommend that you do the same. Turnover is vanity, profit is reality, and cash is, what was it again? Profit is sanity, and cash is reality. That's it. I always mention it. Anyway, turnover, therefore, you shouldn't be blinded by. It's ultimately about what kind of margin are you making on your turnover, because clearly you don't just want to grow your business and in the meantime go bust, which is not an unlikely scenario. And on average, the margin that spin-out organisations are making is around about, in my analysis case, about 2.9%. So let's say roughly 3%, which is not bad actually. And I'll come back to that, why I think that that's not bad. But clearly, your organisations are still relatively young. Most of you spun out without really a balance sheet, so reserves are still low. And on average, if I look at your organisations, then most reserves, 2/3 of you have reserves smaller than 1 month of expenditure, which is not a great cushion to be relying on. So growth is probably the way to get out of this, but healthy growth. So what kind of growth do we see amongst that 9 to 10% of your activities? Well, some of it is of course, let me check my scribbles that I put down on the train. Some of it is substitution. If you go after a new contract, it is very often a contract that was previously with another provider. So it's not real growth for the economy as such, but it's growth for you. And of course, it's very important to go after that kind of opportunity. Some of the growth is, and believe it or not, despite all the austerity that we've seen, there is an increased demand sometimes. And sometimes commissioners still have to spend extra money, for instance, on supported living schemes or certain requirements for their population. And clearly, that's also a source of growth for organisations. I worked with Leading Lives in the past year quite a bit, and they won a fantastic supported living contract for a couple of million on an annual basis. And clearly those kind of opportunities are the ones that are hugely attractive for you. But there is a different type of growth opportunity as well here. There is a direct provision for self-funders, people who have their own money to spend, and once you have the freedom as a spin-out to operate as you see fit, you can respond to that. If, for instance, you have a Meals on Wheels service and you deliver those meals to your clients normally from Monday to Friday, maybe just one time a day, you can respond to that client who asks you, I've got my grandchildren coming over the weekend, can you provide some extra meals over the weekend for me? And it is these spin-out organisations that can say yes to it. The freedom you have to say yes to that is a very important source of growth, and I see it in a lot of you as helping your income streams to grow, and there's tons of examples of that. And then of course there are new models of service coming around, and some of that is innovation from within, innovation that you have identified as, hey, if we can work on this new model, there might just be new income for us to be had here. And some of this innovation is what I call responsive. It's essentially responding to what commissioners have thought up, or even what's thought up in the top of the NHS. So to give you an example, the 5-year forward view from Simon Stevens comes, of course, up with a couple of new models that you're guaranteed to see will drive innovation in the health and social care world, and undoubtedly some of you will be part of that. Well, why plan for growth? And why growth in general? Well, most of your organisations have spun out with the one single contract with your local authority or with your NHS body or your commissioner. And unfortunately, some of you may be in a situation where you actually have to deliver some cost savings over those coming years. Some of you may be lucky enough that it at best stays flat. But regardless of that, you are likely to be in a position where this one contract is by far your most important source of income, if not the only source of income. And therefore it's important to explore additional sources of income to diversify, to make sure that you reduce the reliance on that one main contract, and also to make the most of the market opportunities. Personalisation, of course, is in social care and in healthcare increasingly rolled out, and that gives you the opportunity to go for individuals, people with direct payments, people with their own money to spend, and especially when eligibility levels keep being adjusted because local authorities have got less and less to spend, that means that there's an opportunity for you to jump into that world. It's also about meeting customers' expectations, especially in the social care world, of course. Good examples of people no longer satisfied being looked after just 9 to 5 during weekdays. No, they want to do different things. They want to live a life. And most of you are very good at coming up with new models that allows them to do that, and by doing so, increasing your business. Some of you also have experienced that by having spun out, you have a different type of conversation with your commissioners. You're now a partner. You can help them look for solutions for problems that they didn't realize are actually solutions for. And that means that some of the problems that commissioners have, they will be looking to you to find a solution. To give you, again, an example from one of our clients. This was an organization that helped children with bereavement issues, and they found out that actually there were lots of other children's issues within that particular council and that particular local authority. And by working closely with the commissioner, who previously they never had conversations with face-to-face, all of a sudden they much better understood from each other, A, what the need was from the local authority, and B, what the spin-out was actually able to provide. So a win-win situation, and the organisation has grown tremendously as a result of that. And finally, it's also a defensive strategy. I think if there are opportunities in your patch, you should be going after them, because if you're not going after them, your competition will. And as more and more competition establishes themselves in your patch, the harder it will be to win that next contract, or even to renew your own core contract, because your competition will have a much bigger foothold. And just from that point of view, it's also really important to go after growth. Now, if you, as Jessica and Alison Wonderland says at some point, if you don't know which way you want to go, any route will take you there. If you don't know how you want to grow, if you don't know what you want to achieve with your organization, you're bound to fail in your growth ambition. Just to be opportunistic and wait for the opportunities to arise and land on your doorstep is not going to lead to the growth that is going to be sustainable, and it's not going to lead to success. So my strong recommendation would be for you to plan your growth. Think through who's the decision maker, who's the real client here. I mean, I put the Cocoa Pops here on this slide. I mean, if any of you is a parent, you probably realize that it's not really you who decides who buys what cereal to buy. It's your child who sits in that trolley and helps you decide which cereal you're going to buy. And it's a bit like with your services as well. Is it really the commissioner who buys here, who makes that decision? Is it the end user who makes that decision? Is it the politician who makes that decision? Is it the carer perhaps who makes that decision? So make sure that you've got those stakeholders clear in your head and plan your strategy off the basis of that. Look at your competition and understand what their strengths and weaknesses are so that you can make the most of that. Understand that sometimes there is a need to really be way ahead of the curve. You know, Apple being a famous example, of course, of to a certain extent ignoring customer research and having a very clear vision of where technology is going to go and customer wants and needs are going to go, and being prepared to invest in that at risk, being really entrepreneurial, investing in technology that perhaps may actually not fly, but having a strong belief in that future vision is of course really important and allows you to be ahead of the curve. And doing your number crunching, ultimately. Is it going to work? Is it going to add up? What are the scenarios? Are you going to pumping all your last reserves in that great idea? Is it going to pay off? What's the risk to the organization? So planning is important. But of course, there are lots of uncertainties, and you're not operating in isolation. you're operating in an environment which is constantly moving. So let's spend a little bit of time on what may lie ahead. Of course, I don't have a crystal ball either, but let's just give a couple of pointers to the future. Well, first and foremost, as we all know, the economy is recovering. Great, happy days. A decent, fairly stable projection for economic growth, around about 2.5% to 3%. That sounds encouraging. Unemployment going down, that sounds encouraging, unless your business, of course, is about helping people getting back out of unemployment. Then you might actually be in a position that you have to think about a plan B. And again, inflation is sort of in a good place. Does that mean that all our problems as public sector are resolved and that austerity is behind us? Clearly not. We've just heard Philip saying exactly what I was thinking, that austerity for the next 5 years, especially in the public sector, is not going to go away. And just to stand still, there's still an awful lot of money to be found in public services, just to be able to keep the current level of services up there. And that goes not just for adult social care, that doesn't just go for children care services, it goes across the board, it goes for the NHS, etc. Despite all the promises that are being made at the moment in the general elections. Impact of the elections, speaking of which, I can't even vote, so I won't, being an immigrant. So I certainly won't give you a recommendation, but I think it's fair to say that all parties have given a strong indication that there is a move towards integration of health and social care, potentially even the mental health care being much more on parity with the other two sectors. What that means for you really is that there's a huge demand for innovation, and your nimbleness and your creativity and your preparedness to take some risk is going to help you in achieving well in those next few years. Whether money will be taken out of the NHS or pumped in on an annual basis, that just depends on whether you really believe what the politicians at the moment are telling you. But I think that's the message across the board, and most major parties, or all major parties, are sending us similar messages in that respect. The demographics aren't really going to change either. As you know, an aging population, that doesn't just mean that people get older and that we have to look after more elderly people. It also means that people with complex needs grow older, so you get a sort of a double whammy, for want of a better technical term. Younger people coming through transition that have got used to much higher expectations, and rightfully so. They want to live their lives as independently as possible, and it means that services need to be delivered in a different way, but that's also costly. And that money needs to be found. And people with long-term conditions, for instance, more on the health side, again, will be increasing demand as well. So even if money would stand still, all this increased pressure on services needs to be covered. And that leads to, I think, or at least one of the symptoms of that has been the increased competition and increased tenders. And if you look at the numbers of how many contracts are actually being put out to tender over the recent years, that has increased in every single category of public services. And that is an opportunity for you, but also sometimes a risk. But there is also another trend going on in contracting, and that makes, I think, life a little bit more complex for some of us. I have a very strong impression from working with a lot of you that there is a push from sort of smallish to mid-sized contracts in that area to outwards. And by that I mean there's a push towards services for individuals based on personal budgets, based on personalization, etc. And that means that you have to start to behave a bit like what I call Tescoization. If that word at some point enters the Oxford Dictionary, I will claim it. By Tescoization, I mean Tesco doesn't know how many customers will come through the door tomorrow. They don't know what they're going to buy, really, because they don't have any contracts with you or with me. But, of course, they invest in the future, they do their homework, they've got, of course, a huge wealth of data to rely on from their existing operations, and therefore they can make certain projections and they can see certain trends and make certain assumptions based on which they make their investments and based on which they plan for their delivery. And that means that you can learn from that model quite a lot if you are in a world where personalization becomes increasingly the name of the game. So that's a push in one direction. And for some of you, that push in one direction actually is combined with a push in another direction, which is that some of your contracts opportunities are increasing in size. And that means that commissioners are looking for larger organizations with a financial backbone that they can rely on to deliver those services quite reliably in the coming years over the duration of that contract. And so that means that for some of you, that might mean that you have to consider, how can I take on these larger contracts, or can I take on those larger contracts? If you're a 1 million organization or a $500,000 turnover organization and the contract is a 10 million or 20 million 5-year piece of work, you're not going to win that contract, however good you are. And that's a really tough realization. Some of our clients have had to take have come to that conclusion, and it's a tough one to accept. So how can you then survive in that world with that push for larger contracts? Is consider, how do I partner? Can I subcontract for a larger prime contractor? How do I work with other organizations that allow me still to deliver the services to the people that I'm passionate about? And then there is a further push for even larger contracts, the 100 million a year plus contracts, which I believe will lead to some sort of consolidation. Some of the spin-outs and some of the other organizations will start working increasingly together, if not merge, to be able to play a real competitor in the game where currently predominantly the Sercos and the Sodexos of this world operate. Now, you might say, is it therefore possible to grow this big as a spin-out? Growth, as we've already heard in the intro from Philip, growth is a challenge. Growth is difficult, and how do you do it? And can it be done as a spin-out organization? Or are social enterprise, the social enterprises and spin-out, is their DNA of such makeup that ultimately they're just not fit for growing big, because you're about local services for local people, understanding the local situation. Perhaps that's your thing. Well, I think it's worth looking at an example that shows that it can be done, and it can be done very successfully, still with all the good ingredients of a social enterprise spin-out, but also being able to compete with the biggest boys in the game. So let's have a quick look at Greenwich Leisure. Established in 1993 for a very mundane reason. They had savings to make, and someone clever had figured out that if they could set up as an independent organization, they could claim business rate relief that equaled the savings that they had to make. Now, it's hardly a strategic vision for leisure services for the people of Greenwich, isn't it? Very transactional. Anyway, whether it was a good reason or a bad reason, it doesn't really matter. They established in 1993 and very much are, as you know, focused on leisure services and sports, and a bit of other culture services which involve libraries and other bits and pieces. By now, they're £133 million in turnover, probably a bit more because this number is from 2013. They've got about 6,500 staff. 1/3 is permanent, full-time, and 2/3 is more casual. They recently introduced the Better brand. You may have seen it in your local authority. And they've got a very clear vision around how they deliver services, how they deal with their staff, but also their service users, and what kind of improvements they would like to see, how they interact with the communities, and how they operate their business. And they're not afraid to invest. Just one example is that 2 years ago they managed to construct a social impact bond with Triodos for about £5 million. what's interesting about when you look at their growth trajectory is, of course, that probably doesn't come as a surprise, but it's quite interesting to see that still that you don't grow from when they started 5 million to 133 million. You don't do that overnight, and you don't do that in a straight line. Is the hook coming at me, or
2 minutes to the hook?
I started later. I claim more time. So it takes time to really first bed down as a spin out, improve your business, make sure that it all comes together very nicely, ticks like clockwork. And it's only once you establish that good operating model that you can really start to grow quite dramatically. And you see these the increase in growth really happening in sort of two phases between 2000 and 2009, and then post 2009. And it's also very much based around their local situation. So initially, Greenwich, the red blob, the first few contracts, the blue blob, so not too far away, still in London, central London-ish. So and up to 2000 so up to 2000. So in the first 7 years, that was the expansion that GOL showed. And up to 2009, all growth was still in the Greater London area. And it was only since 2009 that they really started also go for contracts outside of their area, and now are as far afield as York and Cambridge, by the way, where we are based. And yes, this is a social enterprise, but this is no soft and fluffy operation. This is a very slick, very well organized operation, very good on operations, stable executive team. Some of them have been there since the very early days, even before. They've got a stakeholder-led board of trustees, as you would expect from a spin-out, but they've also transformed that governance structure over time so that they have a model where they can retain a local feel, but at the same time understand that they have to represent a much larger organisation nowadays than Greenwich. It doesn't make sense to just have a couple of Greenwich Council representatives, for instance, local authority representatives on that board when you're operating for so many other local authorities. We've got very competitive terms and conditions. They're very tough on that. But they invest a lot in staff as well, so they give a lot back to staff, and they ask staff can become part of their governance board, but they have to pay 25 quid for a share, and they have to commit to adopting the GL's terms and conditions. So if I'm a Cambridge staff member, I can buy into GLL, but it does mean that I have to relinquish my to-be transferred TNCs. So again, you know, lots of ways of making sure that that you buy into the model of the new organisation. And they're also a good example of dual income streams. Just like some of you, they make money clearly from the contracts they agree with the councils, but they also have to earn a lot of their income through individual customers. So your swimmers, your fitness users, etc. So that duality in delivering the services is really important to them. So what's their winning strategy? Well, clearly, a very good bid team. They know what they want to go for. They're very focused. They're very slick, and they've done it now so many times that they know what works. But they also know that just after contracts is not the only winning formula in their organisation. Yes, they have got £133 million turnover, but their margin is also just about 3%. So that means that they have to go after those memberships and sell you more products as individual customers, and they have to have that culture in the organisation very much present throughout. They've got very solid data, both on their performance, so that they can operate very efficiently and effectively, and on social impact. So they do lots of social impact stuff throughout of their services, and they make sure that they can evidence this. And they've got a very compelling offer to councils, which is about a competitive price that they can afford to do. They invest in local facilities, so they make sure that they leave the leisure facilities behind better than how they found them. They make sure that they improve local uptake of sports activities, so that's one element of their social impact. And as I said, they offer staff to join membership. Yeah, 2 minutes, Craig. So, the lesson from GLL in my view is you can grow by winning contracts, but it does take time. It may not have to take as long as GLL. Maybe you can learn a few lessons from them already and speed things up. But decide what your key strengths are and focus, focus, focus. I think for me that in GLL that's one of the biggest lessons. They have a very strong focus on what they are good at, and that's what they build on. They don't get distracted. Be prepared to invest to grow. They've got clearly their investment sorted out and they are spending money on that. But excellent execution, business delivery, ultimately is where it all starts. Make sure you've got evidence to back up your claims. How good are you really? Can you evidence that? Have you got the data to back it up? And be clear on what makes you different. Have a good sales pitch. But just being different, just being a social enterprise, just being staff-led, that's not going to be enough. Okay, finally then. I think you're well positioned to take on a lot of society's challenges that are touched upon in my presentation. I think growth can come from a whole range of sources, and depending on your business model needs to be ready for that. So, not just focus on the local authority if there's lots of individual business to be had, or vice versa. Of course, winning contracts requires a very good bid team, and I'm sure Rob will tell you a lot more what a good bid team will look like. But you need it on top of or next to a very good business that provides first-class services. And with the right focus, the right preparation, the right tools, the right training, the right motivation, the right culture, all those secret ingredients, I think you can be a winning team too. And when you have the next opportunity to go after a contract, maybe you can look like something like this.